The supposed golden age of British gangsterism began in the 1940s and was based in London's sleazy but fashionable Soho.
Because the sex industry is quite centralised on Soho, that's made it the centre for a lot of criminal activity. Because whoever controlled Soho controlled the clubs, controlled the vice, and to a large extent controlled the gambling.
No, in our day, Soho was controlled. And anybody who wanted to do something they shouldn't do, they had to get permission. Literally. Wonderful Soho. We had that marvellous gambling club, didn't we? Charlie Chester's in Archer Street. We had our machines in there. That club was untouchable. Nobody could create a fuss there or cause trouble. So the proprietor was well pleased. Not only did we get a share out the machines, we got a little share out the club as well. So everyone was happy. Because we had our machines in one or two Chinese places as well. And I found them very honourable people. And if any of their numbers cheated on you, they would do it themselves. They would say, no, let us settle it ourselves. And they would. People have always carried guns. After the war, many had it. Soldiers were coming home with them, keeping them when they should have surrendered them. And you could rob army barracks then and get them right, left and centre. And the Americans, the Yanks, they were terrific. Their soldiers would sell them to you for peanuts. There's always been guns.
Prominent gangland figures of the time included the notorious Italian gangster Albert Dimes, the East End hood Billy Hill, and the Jewish protection racketeer Jack Spot. When Hill and Spot joined forces, they soon became the most feared gangsters in Britain.
Jack Spot come to the front during the war and just after. He cut a lot of people, really. And he teamed up with Billy Hill. They were really powerful.
One of the main guys who did it was Mad Frankie Fraser, who worked as Billy Hill's enforcer, using terror to maintain Hill's extortion, protection and gambling rackets.
It was involved in gambling when gambling was in its infancy. You had what you call spills, unlicensed gambling places, where you got a lot of money. And at the races, he had all the bookmakers there. He was very, very big in gambling, and a very successful gambler himself.
Jack Spot was more flash than Billy Hill, but Billy Hill was he was in the background. No, but he was the main man.
Billy Hill hit on the brainwave of all brainwaves. Everyone knows what a crematorium is. And Billy Hill had a superintendent in his pocket. And he would get in touch with him, say, Harry, we're about a game of golf in about 3 weeks' time. Harry said, good idea, Bill. He knew what it meant. It meant that evening, the superintendent will go to the crematorium. You couldn't do it today, the rules are more stricter. Warm it up, I'd arrive with the body, sling it in, salute it, and sling the dust out, side New Scotland Yard or Wandsworth Prison. It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. That's where Billy Hill was brilliant. Well, he would put robberies up to us and tell us, plan it with us, and I'd do them. A bank or smash and grab raid, which was all the go at the time, and robberies, post offices, things like that. All good stuff. And if there was any violence to be done, I was the ideal man for it. I would go the whole limit. The police say I've killed many men. I ain't arguing with them.
But
But events were to blow apart the powerful gangland partnership of Jack Spot and Billy Hill and lead to the most notorious battle in British gangster folklore.
Jack Spot got beaten up by a man called Jimmy Wooder and another guy, and he nicked them. He went to the police and he gave evidence against them at the Old Bailey.
This was a time when there were rules to gangsterism, and Jack Spot had broken the first and most important.
In those days, in the 50s, well, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s and the 50s, there was still this kind of hangover from the Italian ideal with, like, the code of silence, a murder. And people didn't grasp. They didn't talk about their own. They wouldn't, you know, it was the worst thing you could do. It was the kiss of death if you was a criminal, to have your name besmirched by being associated with, or being called a grass. It really was the worst thing that you could do.
But if you're ever arrested for anything, then you keep your mouth shut. Under all circumstances. Don't matter how serious you've been arrested for, don't matter if you were innocent, you keep your mouth shut. Simple as that.
Grassing up his gangster pals was to carry a terrible price for Jack Spot, and Billy Hill chose Mad Frankie Fraser to make him pay. As a code of honour, grassing was considered the worst offence of all, and during his various periods of incarceration, Mad Frankie Fraser was a scourge of police informers.
I would get an electric light bulb, which nobody knew was missing, crush it, and then the bits I crushed I'd give to a friend who worked in the engineer department or something like that, who would really get it crushed. And I'd get it returned and it was like powder. And then I'd somehow get it smuggled into the man's sugar, where then you could buy sugar in the canteen. A big thing it was. And I'd somehow get it in there, and I had quite a bit of success. Tore their guts to pieces, I'm happy to say, without even having to chin them. And they never grasped again. Ever.
So reports that the leading gangster Jack Spot had turned police informer deeply worried his former associate, the East End villain Billy Hill.
Billy Hill got hold of Jimmy Wooder. Said, look, you're going round saying this about Spot. What evidence have you got? And there it was in black and white, Jack Spot's evidence against him from the witness box, the prosecution evidence. And Billy Hill had copies made of it and posted up in pubs and clubs all over London. And Spot realised then he had to do something to get his prestige back.
In a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation, Spot made a list of leading underworld figures whom he intended to kill.
I'd just come out of Broadmoor at the time, and he made a list of 10 people. I was about number 8. I'll never forgive him. I was right down the bottom, number 8. But he had Billy Hill and Albert Dimes right at the top. And he decided on Albert Dimes. Biggest mistake of his life. Albert was in Frith Street, and Spot come up. Hello, Albert, and bosh! Stabbed him in the stomach. Most people would have died. They wouldn't have been strong enough to loss of blood and everything. And the surprise, Albert never had a clue. He recovered, slung Spot off, and run down to a little greengrocer's, and Spot, like an idiot, chased after him, cut him down the back of the head as Albert flung it down. I think he had another 28 stitches in that one.
The fight continued for so long, was so bloody and so public, that it is still remembered in gangster circles as the Battle of Frith Street.
They cut each other like, I think it was 159 times or something, all down the street. Down that street there.
Then somehow, face spot. He deserved the medal. He somehow got the knife off the spot and done him with his own knife. He fight for his life. And Spot collapsed. Wonderful fight it was.
In the aftermath of the fight, everybody assumed that Jack Spot was finished as a gangster, but he had one more trick up his sleeve.
He got hold of 5 kids, gave them all a gun each, and told them to shoot Billy Hill and Albert. Kids only 19, 20, couldn't keep their mouth shut, boasting about it. We kidnapped them, took the guns off them, and then it was decided that I would do Jack Spot, which I did. I cut them to pieces. Women and children, untouchable. People's houses in the neighbourhood where you live and things like that, untouchable. Nice people who you could go in a pub, the local pub with, or the local club, whatever, untouchable. That is really important, really. And if any of your pals are in prison and you can help them in any way, or their families, by all means, definitely.
There was a very well-defined criminal code of honour. Things that a proper, decent criminal, for want of a better term, would or wouldn't do. And if you offended against this code, you would find yourself ostracised. No other decent criminal would have anything whatsoever to do with you, and quite often if you came in company you would be attacked on sight.
In our world, a code of honour is very important. Vital. Vital. That is the most important law of all. That code of honour. There's nothing wrote. You don't have to be. You knew. That was it. No one had to swear an oath. You knew. Simple as that. And if anyone abused that code of honour, they were finished. Good as dead.
Organised gangsterism reached its zenith during the 60s in the East End, with the rise of the notorious Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Helen Keating and Bobby Travers were nightclub entertainers who were close to the Krays and other notorious gangsters of the time. Despite the fact that gangsters like the Krays were vicious, murdering thugs, they nevertheless enjoyed a perverse celebrity status in the East End.
I spent all my childhood in Balance Road, and of course my neighbours were Ronnie and Reggie and Charlie, and I knew the whole family very well, but I knew them as neighbours. Yeah, I've been in a pub with Ronnie, Reggie and everything, and they're saying Guinnesses over by the armfuls to the old people sitting along the benches.
And they was always very quiet, weren't they? It wasn't very flash. They always stood there quiet. And the chap was very friendly with the governor of the Aberdeen, standing in his corner, very quiet, and a good night when they used to go out. And when I worked for them in the Double R, everything finished on time, very well, you know.
Business-like.
Very good.
It was
very good.
Yeah.
Where it was good, you was out feeding, getting plenty of money, but in the night time you was out having a wonderful time, glamorous night. Mixed with film stars, politicians, wonderful. And they loved the gangster. Thank God for that. And we loved them.
The thing about the Krays, their imagery, I mean, for anybody out there, what's the message? There's these two guys, they're breaking the rules, but they look the dog's bollocks, and there must be somebody, they're in the papers, they're doing this. For the underdog, these guys obviously were icons.
Behind this naive adulation of the Krays and other gangsters, the grisly business of killings and protectionism and prostitution continued, as did feuds between gangs.
There were rivalries in those days. I mean, a lot of it was very localised, sometimes between families. But between the two big firms of the day, the Richardsons and the Krays, there certainly was very bad blood. And I think if the Richardsons hadn't been nicked and sent away, there would have been quite heavy bloodshed, although immediately after they were shed away, one of their firm was shot dead by Ronnie.
But this time, Ronnie Kray didn't get away with it. The tide was turning against old-style gangsterism. By the late 60s, smarter police methods and draconian prison sentences were blowing apart the code of honor on which the old gangs depended. In 1969, Ronnie Kray went to prison and never came out. Norman Parker has had a close relationship with the underworld. He served 24 years for the murder of a fellow gang member and spent the majority of his sentence as a Category A prisoner. He now writes books.
If you could rob a bank for £30,000 or £40,000 in 1960 and you were four-handed, you know, you've got £7,000–8,000 each, which in those days was a considerable sum of money. To get the same sort of money from stealing a lorry or burglary or protection rackets would take you probably a very much longer time. It's hard to say how much anyone would earn in any one year, but there were certain prolific bank robbery gangs. I mean, certainly the Bertie Smalls gang of the late 60s, early 70s, they stole hundreds of thousands of pounds each at each robbery.
The authorities had declared war on the gangsters, and the new threat of very long jail sentences was to have a profound effect.
Most people were terrified, because if caught, he'd go away for a long time.
Bigger prison sentences had a big impact on gangsterism. The threat of spending the rest of their lives behind bars was incentive enough for many villains to give evidence against their gangster pals to escape prosecution. The criminal code of honor that had long been held in such high esteem was rapidly falling apart. For more than 30 years, James Morton was a criminal defense lawyer who represented a number of well-known gangsters, including Mad Frankie Fraser.
There's always going to be a worry that you're going to be betrayed. It's one of the occupational hazards of being a criminal, that somebody from your family or friends is going to grass on you. And obviously the higher the stakes, then the more the risk. And you could never tell whether your long and trusted mate, or even your brother on occasions, wasn't going to turn supergrass and put you in the frame so that he got a 4 or 5 year sentence instead of a 15 or 17 year one. The impact of the supergrass comes in about 1969-1970, when Bertie Smalls, who led a very successful team of bank robbers, was himself arrested, and instead of facing it out and getting a very substantial term of imprisonment, started the fashion of being a supergrass. In fact, he was followed immediately by a number, and this to a large extent broke down the old-fashioned bank robber.
When I was in prison, doing that 20 years, and the first supergrasses come out of the woodwork, I couldn't believe it. Because I was in prison with them all, them who got put away by them. It defied imagination. You know, it really hurt.
One of the reasons that grassing has become more commonplace is that not only are there far more draconian sentences, but the police have got a much wider scope to offer deals. In the old days, if you was involved in a crime, it wouldn't be allowed that you wouldn't be prosecuted at all. If somebody came forward and gave evidence against his co-defendants, he might get a lesser sentence. But what you'll find nowadays is if somebody comes forward and they are willing to give evidence, they might not even be charged. And not only that, given a separate identity and set up in a separate house somewhere.
And then another super grass had come out of the woodwork, then another. And it really hurt.
By the last decades of the 20th century, high-tech surveillance, armed police units and stiff jail sentences had effectively killed off traditional gangsterism in Britain. Unfortunately, organised crime was to be given a new lease of life with the arrival of drugs.
But you could see a change take place within prison, certainly in the early 70s. Suddenly, student types, middle class types came in who were drug smugglers, who were drug manufacturers. And they'd be sitting down cheek by jowl within a prison situation. And I remember one classic incident. There was the Operation Julie crowd in, who were basically university middle class type people who manufactured a lot of acid. And there was one guy was watching TV, sitting surrounded by a group of armed robbers who were doing 15 years or whatever. And the Lamborghini Espada came up on the TV screen. And one of the robbers said, "God, what a good car." And one of the young middle-class drug dealers said, "Yeah, I had two of those." And you know he did, because up in his cell there's a picture of him, you know, with two Lamborghini Espadas. And when they started talking to him and find out, well, how much money was generated? And they said, well, we made several £1 million. But the longest sentence for the ringleader was 12 years, and the others got 8 years and 6 years. And you could see the armed robbers thinking, now just a minute, us four got 15 years each for going out and stealing £80,000 between us. These people have got 600 grand, £2 million each, and all they've got is 6-8 years. We're definitely in the wrong game.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.